Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I am your host, Catherine Hadro, in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thank you for joining us. In this week's show, what is the role of the bishops and Catholic laity to boldly build up a culture of life? We discuss. A New York Times op-ed claims pro-lifers don't care about babies nor women. We speak out. And this.
I hope they walk away feeling just invigorated that we are winning this culture battle, that we are winning this culture war, but that we are stronger together when we work together.
We take you to New Orleans, Louisiana, where hundreds of pro-lifers gathered this past weekend for the 4th annual Pro-Life Women's Conference. But first, we go to our top story. We speak with a Catholic pro-life senator from Indiana about a recent Supreme Court announcement involving his state. The Supreme Court recently came to a divided decision on a pro-life law in Indiana. The High Court upheld one provision of the law that requires the humane and dignified disposal of the remains of aborted babies. But the court also declined to review Indiana's prenatal non-discrimination law, which prohibits abortion based on the race or gender of an unborn child. Both were signed into law by then Indiana Governor Mike Pence. The Supreme Court's decision comes as several states pass pro-life laws that could present a future challenge to Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion nationwide. Indiana Catholic Senator Mike Braun joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator, thanks for being on the show.
Good to be on.
First of all, Senator, what is your reaction to the Supreme Court's recent decision regarding Indiana's pro-life law?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because that's the reason we need to keep getting judges in there that don't take the almost automatic pro-choice stance. I'm not surprised. Almost everything we've tried to do through our state legislature gets caught up in the courts. Recently, the Supreme Court did rule on something, and I'm hoping that what we're going to have is over time, more of this make it to the Supreme Court level, because almost every state, the federal courts jump in when we make moves that are going to try to knock back on abortion clinics, anything that we're doing to enhance pro-life. They come in immediately and put a stay, and that's the current dynamic. So I hope that improves.
Regarding the Indiana law, the Supreme Court did not weigh in on the provision banning discrimination abortion, which is based on the race, gender, or disability diagnosis of an unborn child. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Senator?
Was disappointed with that. I think that's a message from the Supreme Court that it's not going to tackle anything now that goes beyond somewhat innocuous or not significant, but I don't think that means necessarily that they won't take on the more significant cases down the road. I'm hopeful because if it doesn't happen there, we're going to still be dealing with this same context. Or they could start sending messages by taking on more stuff at the Supreme Court to send a signal to the federal court system.
Speaking of Indiana, there is another Indiana politician in the spotlight right now. South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg is running as a Democratic presidential candidate. Buttigieg has advocated for late-term abortion and, as mayor, has gone head-to-head with a pro-life pregnancy care center over a simple zoning decision. Is Pete Buttigieg's position on abortion in line with Indiana and the American electorate? What insight can you share, Senator?
I think it is not, and I think it's not only abortion, it would be his other points of view, which line up almost lockstep with the liberal side of his party. Pete might be refreshing in the sense that he's younger, taking a little different approach, but his ideology is right in line with that of Chuck Schumer and the liberal side of the Senate and the House, and I think most of the people that are running for president on the Democratic side. That's not in line with the values of most Hoosiers.
Senator, a federal judge recently released a preliminary injunction allowing an abortion center to open in South Bend without a license from the Indiana State Department of Health. Won't this put women at risk in your state?
There's no doubt about it, and I think that, again, is an aggressive, bold move by a federal court. And that's the way the tug of war is going to be playing out over the next year or so, until we would get the presidency, have 60 senators in the U.S. Senate, and control the House. We can't do anything legislatively. The Supreme Court really needs to do the heavy lifting, and I think until they make a real statement, we're going to see a lot of these kind of discussions on the edges, not really moving things significantly in favor of some of the more significant pro-life legislation we've seen.
Indiana Senator Mike Braun, thanks for being back on the show with us.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us now in our DC studio for pro-life analysis in reaction to more pro-life headlines is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Marjorie, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Catherine.
First off, we heard Senator Mike Braun share some insight into Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg's stance on abortion. How does the South Bend mayor compare to that of other candidates?
I'm a huge fan of Senator Braun. You know, he's a Knight of Columbus. He's a fantastic human being, great judge of character, also very fair. I agree with him on Buttigieg. I think that there is no question that he would like to have the veneer of a moderate state, the conservatism of Indiana, making him look like a candidate that might be able to appeal to the Rust Belt and other places that are battleground states for the presidential race. But the truth is, he's taken no particular stand at all that puts him out of league with every single one of the other candidates, with Harris, Booker, all of them. And that stance is to be for against a law that would save a baby at birth, born alive. They've all taken that stance. He is definitely for repealing the Hyde Amendment so that you and I have to participate with our money, with our hard-earned cash in funding that. So while he may have a little bit different veneer, he certainly is not in any way a moderate candidate when it comes to the pro-life issue.
It's a really good reminder. And we also discussed with the senator the Supreme Court's recent action on the Indiana pro-life law. Can you speak to the significance of that and what it's indicative of?
I think this Indiana law, the abortion discrimination piece, could potentially be the explosive issue that eventually gets to the Supreme Court. The first part of that law was a real just hands down victory, that it allows states to sadly dispose of the human remains of unborn children in a way that they deem dignified rather than just being treated as human waste and thrown into a dumpster. The other piece of that law, which was discouraging in one way because we wanted the court to actually take that case up, look at it, was in two ways still good. It was not struck down under Casey, the Planned Parenthood versus Casey law. They basically just said, let's let it sit. And if anyone wants to Google Justice Thomas's opinion on this in terms of, he was explaining why he wasn't going to take it up, but he wanted it to be very clear, his opinion about the ethnicity form of discrimination when it comes to abortion. He went through the whole Margaret Sanger Planned Parenthood history about how we can't stand in this nation for such values. And he said it's inevitable that we will have to come to terms on what this is when it comes to abortion.
And speaking of the courts, there was a major pro-life victory last week when a panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals lifted injunctions against the Trump administration's Protect Life rule. What does this rule exactly allow now?
Yeah. So the Protect Life rule keeps abortion out of the family planning program in the United States. It's called the Title X program, for lack of, that's the nomenclature. What happened there in the 9th Circuit, of all places, the most liberal circuit in the country, is really in the process of changing. Thank you to our California people who prayed through this whole thing. There was a 3-bank of judges that said that they gave the opinion that this rule should be allowed to go into place, that abortion funding, as stated in the statute, should stay separate from family planning always. Now, unfortunately, there's further challenges. There's going to be an 11 judge bank of judges that will also rule on it, and we'll see what happens there. Unfortunately, it's not over. And so it isn't in law yet.
Okay.
But we believe, look, it could be a month, it could be a year. It's another reason that, frankly, the coming elections make an enormous difference.
We are seeing abortion advocates challenge the Protect Life rule in the courts, but is it in jeopardy at all by Congress?
Well, and in Congress right now, you know where we are. We're in a constant game of defense in terms of what comes out of the House. Every horrible thing that's coming out of the House of Representatives, and there's a lot of horrible stuff, is backstopped by the Senate, which is fantastic. Now we have a pro-life majority there, and the President of the United States, who has put out a veto threat for anything that overturns any current pro-life policy. So while it is very difficult, we can't make any headway in the House, we at least know that we have champions in the Senate and we have a champion in the White House who will not let any of these things get overturned.
Continued. And finally, Marjorie, turning now to another devastating story. A court in the United Kingdom authorized doctors to commit an abortion on a developmentally disabled woman, a Catholic, against her own wishes. Thankfully, this week, a higher court overturned the ruling. As an American pro-life leader, what's been your reaction to this international story?
Well, Catherine, you know, we talk about the news when it comes to life all the time. This is one that just cuts across everything. Our faith, the news, our emotions, our position as parents, as sisters of people that we know have special needs. I have a daughter that exact same age with exactly the same diagnosis. And what we're hearing from the mother and the child, who has an intellect of 6, but the body and the soul created by God that is at a different place, that they wanted to keep the child. So only a mentality that sees children and people as objects and disposable, that only an elite view that we know better about what's best, and that you can't possibly, grandmother of this baby, take care of it because we know better and it should never be allowed to come into the world. Thank God that sentiment was slapped down by the court. But for a few days here, we did not think that. And they've got a problem in England. This is the same. This is the same England that was with Alfie Evans' case and with Charlie Gard. I mean, and this is just another in the string. And I think it's waking them up. I know it has awakened the world.
Truly praise God that was overturned.
Praise God, yes. Right.
And thank you for being with us and sharing your analysis and insight with us, Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. It's always a challenge to get pro-life legislation passed on Capitol Hill, especially when it's a divided Congress, and even more so when there's a pro-abortion Speaker of the House like we have today with Representative Nancy Pelosi. In the wake of strong pro-abortion opposition that we've seen in this Congress, it's more important now than ever pro-life senators stand firm in their efforts to protect life. Senators need to know the pro-life movement is watching, and we need them to stand with us. That brings us to this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to send a message to your senators, urging them to protect the administration's pro-life priorities. You can send your message by going to ProLifeWeekly.com. Once you get to our website, all you have to do is type in your basic information, like your name, and your message will be delivered straight to your senators. Nancy Pelosi has refused to bring the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act to the House floor for a vote. She's even expressed opposition to the Hyde Amendment, which protects taxpayers from paying for abortion procedures. These are examples of how this administration's pro-life priorities are under attack, and even more reason why we need pro-life senators to stand strong. Take the time to send a message to your senators today so they are reminded to protect women and the unborn. All you have to do is go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Turning now to our next segment, building up a culture of life in today's world can often seem like an uphill battle, but one group is equipping Catholics to do just that. The Napa Institute prepares Catholic leaders to defend and advance the Catholic faith in today's emerging secular society. Its 9th annual conference in the Napa Valley, slated for late July, is stacked with pro-life Catholic speakers, from St. Gianna Mala's own daughter to Cardinal Raymond Burke. John Meyer joins us from our EWTN West Coast studio in the Diocese of Orange in California. He is the executive director of the Napa Institute. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Catherine. Really a pleasure to be here.
I'm grateful to have you. And John, the Catholic Church has undergone 2,000 plus years of history. Can you put into perspective for us how great are the challenges today for the pro-life issue?
Well, I think the challenges are great as always, and it's a great time to be saints, but I think there's tremendous opportunity right now. Really with the laws passed on both sides of the issue. Obviously, we all know what's going on in states like Georgia or Alabama, which are great opportunities in the courts, but I think we're equally as much helped by what's going on in New York and Illinois, because it's bringing to light the issue in ways it's never been brought to light for people on the other side. I think one of our great challenges is that people live in echo chambers. Who they get their news from, who they talk to, how they think about others is almost predetermined or curated for them. So when you get something like a partial birth abortion bill in Illinois and people start to look at what does that mean, it starts to have them re-examine their whole belief system on abortion. The idea of human dignity that they've never thought of when they see the atrocity that is committed in these bills in Illinois and New York, they can kind of reconsider, well, if I don't agree with this, then maybe I need to reconsider my entire position. So I think that's where we've seen swings in the polls. And I think it's a great help to us to bring that to light. The same way David Daleiden brought to light the atrocities of the organs, I think that now we're getting the atrocities of what is abortion really, and how can we not ignore the human baby anymore.
It's a really good point. It's in the forefront of people's mind. And John, we as Catholics are called to be in the world, but not of it. How then do we best engage on the life issue with those around us?
Well, we have to be apostles to the world. We have to go out there and speak to the world. And I think we need to approach it. One of the things that society lacks right now is civil discourse. So I think going out there confidently and with fortitude and explaining our position in a way that people maybe have never heard. Have them look at the issue maybe for the first time ever. I think a lot of people, it's an issue they've never deeply considered, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's a lack of faith formation, of human formation, and we also need to bring it to an emotional state. The left on this issue has always used emotion as the women's rights. One of our good friends, Pastor Eugene Rivers, just shared with me a campaign he's doing, Black Life Matters. She's a child, not a choice. And it's a simple slogan that has profound meaning and really causes you to think deeply about the issue. So I think not necessarily going out to argue the issue, but to share the good news, as we're called to as Christians, to change people's hearts and minds.
And to share these stories. John, how can the Napa Institute, your group, contribute to building up a culture of life? What's your goal there?
Well, Napa has 3 pillars in everything we do: formation, prayer, and community. And I think what we can do is prepare leaders in all 3 of those ways, forming them so that they can meaningfully defend the position of life, the church's positions, and do it in a concrete, meaningful way. But then at the same time, come together in communities of prayer, because we know as Catholics that this is also a spiritual battle, and we need the help of the Holy Spirit to win it. But community is very important. One of the things Napa does very well is it brings together communities of Catholic leaders so that they can work together. Collaboration is key here, and I think it's one thing we lack, especially in the pro-life movement, is collaboration among organizations.
And looking at this year's Napa Institute Conference speakers in July, the lineup includes Bishops Thomas Paprocki, Thomas Daly, and Joseph Strickland. All of these bishops have spoken out boldly against pro-abortion Catholic politicians. Yep. What role do the bishops play in defending the sanctity of life?
Well, they are our shepherds, and they need to be outspoken. And that's exactly why we chose those 3 bishops, and also Archbishop Chaput to be on our panel of bishops this year, because we need brave shepherds. We look to them to be that moral authority, and they need to stand up and do it. Similar to the way that Bishop Tobin in Rhode Island stood up on the LGBT issues, and he's getting slammed right now by the left. But we need to have that bravery among our shepherds to stand up and be the moral authority, to speak the truth, so that then Catholics are empowered to do the same thing.
John Meyer, Executive Director of the Napa Institute, thank you so much for your insight, and thank you for taking time to join us. Thanks so much, Catherine. To find out more about the Napa Institute or to register for their July conference, go to napa-institute.org. When we come back,
I hope every woman walks out of here knowing that their voice matters and that they have a right to speak the truth.
Hundreds of women gather in the Big Easy for the pro-life cause. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I am your host, Catherine Hadro. A fiction writer recently took to the pages of the New York Times to claim pro-lifers have never cared about babies or women. That is this week's Speak Out segment. Novelist John Irving, known for his pro-abortion work Cider House Rules, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times just days ago, asserting the pro-life movement is on a mission to punish women. In his piece, Irving argued the pro-life label is merely a marketing term, writing, quote, "Whatever the anti-abortion crusaders call themselves, they don't care what happens to an unwanted child, not after the child is born, and they've never cared about the mother." Irving also went after the Catholic Church, claiming, quote, "The Roman Catholic Church willfully subject women to mandatory childbirth and motherhood." There's nothing like hearing from a pro-abortion man what a Catholic pro-life woman supposedly believes. Just to clear something up in case there's ever been any confusion on this, as a Catholic woman, I have never been informed that I'm mandated to give birth to maintain my Catholic faith. It's not like I missed that memo at Mass or in Catholic school, because it is a wildly dangerous and anti-Catholic lie that John Irving is pushing forward in his piece. But the lies in this New York Times op-ed don't end there. The accusation the pro-life movement doesn't care about women and babies is easily squashed simply by taking a look at pregnancy centers all across the country. To those who say pro-lifers don't care about babies after they are born, please point me to the nearest Planned Parenthood daycare, parenting classes, free maternity clothing, baby clothing, and diapers. You won't find that because that doesn't exist. It is the pro-life movement sacrificing their time, talent, money, and energy for the sake of the child. Why? Because unlike Mr. Irving, we know that there is no such thing as an unwanted child. It is obvious this New York Times op-ed is just the latest piece of fiction Mr. John Irving has written. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to send a message to your senators, urging them to protect the administration's pro-life priorities. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Hundreds of pro-lifers gathered in New Orleans this past weekend for what was the biggest pro-life women's conference so far. We went and take you with us for this week's Pro-Life Focus. In the heart of New Orleans, Louisiana, where Creole, jazz, and beignets are king, over 800 pro-life women came by the bayou this past weekend for the 4th annual Pro-Life Women's Conference.
And I love seeing all the different, organizations. It's just, I'm really happy to be a part of this movement.
It can seem cliche, but even just being here for the few hours, I feel so empowered to be with sisters and other professional women who are fighting for women's rights in the true way.
This year's conference has been its biggest so far, coming on the heels of Unplanned's box office success. The movie, based on former Planned Parenthood director turned pro-life leader Abby Johnson, who also is the founder of the Pro-Life Women's Conference.
I was hearing this rhetoric from Planned Parenthood, from the media, and I had heard it for 8 years when I worked at Planned Parenthood, that in order to be pro-woman, you had to be pro-choice. And after being in the pro-life movement at that time for 5 years, I knew that was a lie. I knew that was dishonest. When I worked in Planned Parenthood, coming together and assembling, that was part of the pro-choice culture. So meeting together at conferences, coming together for conventions, for meetings, for trainings, that was a very normal part of our movement. And I think that was one of the reasons that we were so unified in our messaging, our approach, our strategy. And I looked around at the pro-life movement and I realized we were not doing that.
Johnson designed the conference to be an opportunity for pro-life women across the country to connect, strategize, and network. They hear talks, sit in on breakout sessions, and have plenty of time to socialize at a wide variety of booths.
This conference is for women, it's run by women, it has a women-centric theme, which is different than other conferences. And it's not that we don't value men in the movement. We love men. Most of us are married to strong pro-life men, and we love their leadership in the movement, but we all have to admit that abortion is targeting women in a very unique and different way.
But there was at least one man there. NFL superstar Ben Watson, a father of 7 and outspoken pro-life advocate, made a surprise Saturday appearance and speech.
Whatever your role is in life, we need you to do the best that you can do with the talents and the gifts and the occupation and the role that God has given you.
A cameo appearance by a star athlete was just part of the fun of the event, which felt less like a conference and more like a pro-life weekend getaway. When was the last conference you attended where there was a fashion show? This one featuring the new pro-life fashion line, Culture of Life 1972. Or a self-care room where you can spend quiet time getting a haircut or even a massage.
I think it's just so refreshing to see so many women from all different backgrounds coming together, and there's this the stereotype of it's all old white men telling us what to do with our bodies, and you look around the room, 800 women, like that's not the case, and it's out of love, it's out of compassion.
Victoria Martin flew down from Canada after winning tickets for the art piece she submitted for the conference's art show.
The piece that I did actually is called Legacy, and it's really about just when women lead, they pass their values on to the next generation. And so I think it's so fitting that I brought my daughter.
I thought it was a great idea because it's cool to see all these women coming together just standing up for one big cause, and so I thought it'd be cool to come.
I'm so proud of her.
Every woman had a unique reason why they felt called to go, including this mother, who could be seen in one of Pennsylvania State Representative Brian Sims' viral videos. They caught national attention because he harassed her and her 2 teenage daughters as they prayed outside of a Planned Parenthood facility.
After everything kind of blew up in our life and we were looking for help and support, I found out about this conference and I thought I need to be there to just hear from other women, what they're doing, share our stories, and just really appreciate what's going on around the country in the pro-life movement.
And it's that pro-life community that will hopefully stay and grow beyond the big easy.
I hope every woman walks out of here knowing that their voice matters and that they have a right to speak the truth unequivocally, and that it's our privilege and our duty to do that every single day in our lives.
I hope they walk away feeling just invigorated that we are winning this culture battle, that we are winning this culture war, but that we are stronger together when we work together.
That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, be sure to reach us at ProLifeWeekly@EWTN.com or search for EWTN Pro-Life on social media. We'd love to connect with you there. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.